let's dive into this quickly. My name is Christian Megel. I'm founder of Venture Lane, startup up in Venture Lane Studios. We're actually a startup up for everybody here in the Boston area and in the Northeast, and a studio and accelerator for early stage B2B startups, everything that has to do with software and has actually looking into a private market. We've been around for 3 years, and practically since the beginning, we're doing this series here called Fastlane, where we invite the most prolific names here in the Boston startup ecosystem, but also Chicago and New York, and want to know what the state of the nation is, number one, and number two, we want to hear like how they see the market and what kind of feedback they can give to early stage founders or people that are out there and interested in raising money. And I think the current title, How I Would Raise a Seed If I Was a Founder in This Market, probably hits it on the nail. And TJ, I think you have like a good hand of finding the right titles, because we got a ton of people who signed up for this. Now, welcome to this. Love that you bring this perspective of entrepreneur, having been a partner in a large VC firm, but now doing your own fund, and you're going through this time as an entrepreneur yourself in a way, and you kind of probably you never stop being an entrepreneur and can give us the two sides of the story here. So welcome on the webinar.
Thank you.
Awesome. Would love to know, give us a little bit of background. I mean, you went from being a consultant and being in the consultant area to start your own business, become part of the venture community, and now starting your own fund. Tell us a little bit about that and how it became, and why what you're doing right now is your personal why.
Sure. I'll keep it brief. But I moved out to Boston in early 2000, right like at the middle of the commercialization of the internet. Worked for various startups, mostly in the capacity of consulting larger companies around how to use the internet. That took me to a company called Compete, which was my real first startup experience. That was with David Cancel, Ryan Burke, and a number of other like prolific kind of founders and operators in the community. And then I decided to start FlipKey, which was Airbnb before Airbnb wasn't Airbnb, but it was a big deal for a hot minute. We were acquired by TripAdvisor. We powered the TripAdvisor vacation rental experience. And then that took me into angel investing. I ended up being an EIR at Highland, then joined Accomplice as a venture partner, which then turned into a full partner. And last year, right before, I guess right after lockdown, I decided to start my own fund that was focused on kind of the future of how people buy things, specifically like commerce infrastructure, not limited to Shopify, more just like how you purchase anything, whether it be travel, a CPG product, or even maybe insurance or whatever, a home. So that's what we look at. It's just like, what is the future of how people buy things? It's a $40 million fund. We are very like early stage focused. It's myself, Travis Lowry, and Jake Cohen, who is at Klaviyo. He's an OG guy at Klaviyo. He's a venture partner with us. So it's like 2.5 people, and yeah, we're really well known both in Boston, New York, and definitely in the kind of commerce enablement space. Awesome. And yeah, happy to go through this. I've definitely lived it on all sides at this point. Tell me
a little bit about more the fund. I think people will be interested is like what kind of check sizes you have, what's the stage that you usually invest in, maybe what a couple of examples that you invested in, or a couple of cases or industries or verticals.
Yeah, I think the most clear is that we're kind of eclectic. We will come in later stage every once in a while with kind of a token gesture. We can't be as a $40 million fund, we can't be very meaningful to founders past a certain stage. So usually our checks are minimum 500, max check we write is 1.5. We like to keep the valuation. We like to come in, our entry point is before 20 mil pre. Ideally it's before 10 mil pre. But our the model we use is we we don't really get caught up on the valuation, like that rule, that $20 million rule. It's more of like a guiding post. What we really concentrate on is believing that the opportunity has 100x multiple outcome to it.
Yeah.
And so that's the exercise we run through. And I think it's important, like that's like, we're not unique in the fact that we're looking for like large outcomes. But we literally have to sit, anyone who sponsors a deal here has to model it and show the group how. Now, granted, you might have to like stretch the truth a little bit and like really be optimistic, but you have to take people through a logical, reasonable, like kind of chapter book of like, and this is the outcome, and that's 100x. And then if you're like, yeah, I guess that's kind of possible, we would consider it. If you don't get there, we think it's an opportunity for a different fund. We really want to.
Do you want to lead, or are you open to follow?
We're agnostic. We lead plenty of deals. Probably like one of the more recent deals, I guess it was over the 20 mark, was Blue Onion. They do automated accounting for commerce companies. And so that was a $5 million round on around 30 pre. And so we led that. And we brought in Entree and Morningside and a couple other groups, but we wrapped that up pretty quickly. And that was that's a clear case of, they built a service that automates reconciliation, which is a problem that literally every commerce brand faces. Like, it's a grueling process. It takes 2 days. They've turned it into a 2-minute process. So it's like, it's a ubiquitous solution, very hard. Traction was at, growing, like doubling every 3 months. And so you were like, that's even post kind of market crash, we're really happy with where we are on that one. And that's a good example of going after something hard that's big, and it breaks our $20 million kind of threshold, but we're willing to do that if everything else looks good.
Yeah, I think you were always somebody who's like, if the opportunity is right, you're up for it. No, that's awesome. Just very quickly, as we're going a little bit through an interview style here, guys, use the chat if you want to exchange with other people that are on this call here. Put in your LinkedIn profile, reach out to other people that are on this call. Number one. Number two, if you have questions for TJ or something that you want me to ask TJ or weigh in a little bit, please use the Q&A button down there, and we'll make sure that we ask the questions that you put in there. Now, tell us a little bit. Like, I would want to hear your take on the last 2 years. Seemed a little crazy. Like, it went from COVID shutdown. I saw valuation shortly coming down. Everybody kind of ready to kind of lock down. Some people would be still strong in the market, and all of a sudden we saw valuations coming to heights that we've never seen before, and now that changed again. So tell us a little bit of what happened in the market over the last 2 years, and what's your interpretation of that, and where are we today?
Yeah, well, so if I had to pare that down, I mean, there's that. We could talk about that all night, but like, we need to remember, like, before COVID hit, the market was already hot. There was the birth of new funds. I think that was one of the fastest growing times for new funds. So the amount of money flowing in was quite high, and the crossover funds really started like leaning towards private companies and trading out of public. And the reason is like Tiger as an example, like it felt like they were just creating an index fund of Series B, C, D companies that would then graduate in what was a very hot public market. And so that was just an enormous amount of supply of capital coming into the market. And so, the punchline is like, there was just a ton of capital ready to be deployed. Then COVID hits, lockdown ensues, everyone freaks out. Public market kind of falls, private market falls, or private market just more is like temporarily on hold. So government then sends in $1.9 trillion, pumps $1.9 trillion of new money into the economy, and people wake up with like cash in their bank accounts or like in their mailbox, but they can't go to the store and they can't go to work. So basically, all this like 1.9 gets funneled directly into digital channels. So you had, we have a lot of exposure in like kind of D2C, like underlying platforms. And so the volumes were like incredible. Like every D2C brand was riding a tailwind. And because large marketers had pulled out of Facebook and Instagram, it was cheaper to actually advertise on those channels during that time. So literally you just saw like commerce taking up, and then any kind of like digital B2B platform people had to use because like everything's remote. So you have all digital.
Digitalization, like, had this huge leap of like actually what would usually take 3, 4, 5, 6 years on adaptation of new technologies, all of a sudden was compressed in multiple months, and it would be, leapfrogging
Correct.
everything,
And that
right?
was it. Not only was it compressed, it would have been compressed regardless, but the stimulus had to go somewhere and it went through the digital pipes. So all those numbers looked great. And then you start forecasting out at like that kind of growth, and people started having some unrealistic expectations. So you have this perceived, this artificial momentum to some degree. You have a ton of capital sitting on the sidelines, and yet the actual volume of venture grade kind of opportunities is somewhat flat. And so like it's just math that like prices got bid up. There was a ton of capital, flat amount of like actual opportunities, perceived like, the modeling data was like giving somewhat erroneous like views into like the 3, 5 year like forecast. And so money piled into these companies. Valuations went like sky high, and that also drove like the public markets. And so when you fast forward, like stimulus is spent, like that's exhausted. And so now you're like, oh, people don't have money to spend on like stuff they don't necessarily need anymore. Like now it's now it's back to like the good old days, and stores are open. But so all those numbers, and I don't know many D2C brands who've stayed on forecast. Even like digital, like those that were the Zooms of the world, like everyone is off because like their inputs were off in terms of like forward forecasting. And so you're just having a correction, right? So when you look at how vast, like the historically publicly traded B2B software companies trade at like 8 to 9 sales multiple, just as like as a very generic number. For a bit of time, large growth stage companies, if you got a valuation that was like 30 sales multiple, that was considered a deal for a hot moment. And so this isn't like a 50% correction. Like this might be, a 66% correction in terms of like people beginning to recognize what historical multiples. And we always like, the market always kind of corrects to the mean. And so that's the process we're in right now. The good news is for entrepreneurs, like two really bits of good news. That pull forward has like, even though there's not as much like kind of consumer money built into the system to like continue the growth that we saw, the adoption of these channels was fast forwarded by 5 years. So in terms of the population having access and familiarity with various digital channels, like that's in the bag, and we can like move forward knowing that we have those adoption rates. In addition, the supply of capital is actually still very high, right? There have been record funds announced over the last 6 months, even during, funds being announced
Billions
during.
and billions of dollars. There's no shortage of money that's being collected and now needs to be spent too, right?
Correct. And we have to like, once you have a fund, like you don't really get paid if you don't deploy the capital. And so I think what you're going to see is like a little, I think people are a little in shock right now. So you're going to see a lot of folks with their hands in their pockets. But I think that's going to be mostly at the later stage. Like seed stage, it's still an area where not, for a minimum amount of capital, people can, gain a decent amount of ownership, and you can play a numbers game and then wait out the market. It's the growth stage that's tricky right now because
So
it doesn't have that next step.
usually Series B and up, is that?
Yeah, I would say Series B and up, because there where you're like now having to think about an IPO or an M&A schedule with not very much M&A going on, and no IPO schedules. It's
SPACs
really,
are kind of gone.
and
IPO
SPACs are gone.
kind of.
And I think that M&A is going to go through a 18-year process of like kind of predatory behavior. Like I don't think you're going to see a lot of premiums in the market. And so that's where we are right now. And it's like, dude, I've lived this a couple different times, like whether it was the dot-com crash or the Great Recession or every little thing in between. Like, dude, remember 9/11 hit, like in the middle of the dot-com crash. So we've been through cycles before that are actually much, I think, much scarier than this. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's like 12 to 18 month period where the market's going to be a lot more conservative, but really good entrepreneurs will take advantage of it and come out cleaner on the other side. So, you know, you just survive. You survive in advance.
So let me summarize. So what I'm hearing is there's still tons of there's still tons of money out there. Money needs to be deployed. Some of them will probably be reserved to kind of rather follow on and take care of the current portfolio. But there's, for early stage, probably there's still demand out there for company, probably a little bit more selective, like good bones, traction, everything that you need to do. Later stage, a little tougher if you maybe got 15, 20x, 25x before. Now you're sometimes going towards a 6, 8x. I've seen in a later stage, if you get money at all, right? So people want to have the proof points, but then yes, we're gonna get out of it. The question, you said 12 to 18 months. Is this 12 to 18 months? I heard some others saying like, you know what, I think like give it fall, things will come back to normal. There's too much pressure of actually spending the money that people have collected. What's your point? What's your gauge on that?
I mean, let me be clear. No. I don't know. But I would say that the Tigers of the world have taken such a loss that I just don't think you're going to see them playing for a decent amount of time. And I actually think the publics still have room to go down. Like, you still look at just broad valuations, and you're like, the correction hasn't fully stopped. And I also don't want to underplay the war in Eastern Europe is like a very real thing.
That's not going away.
And not going away, and could get escalated as well. And so I think that gas prices at $5 is a problem. And that is a problem that could get worse. In addition, if it's escalated in terms of supply chain, energy costs, these are things that are, to me, do not appear to be getting corrected in 6 months. And so I would much rather my entrepreneurs plan for kind of a cold winter for 18 months and then let the world correct itself and then be in a position of strength. I think 6 months, if you're waiting for that puts us at Q4. If you're waiting for that and you're planning your cash for that, I think you're potentially playing with fire. The market could still be, except the market could easily be colder than it is right now.
Yeah, and you're building already the bridge to actually the big question. Now, if you were a founder right now and wanted to raise a seed, how would you go about it? What kind of choices would you make, and how would you go about it? Let's say in the yes no tree of do it, not do it, do this, do that. What would be the first things that you would do? It's okay, maybe I'm short on cash, maybe I have 6 months runway. What would you do?
So you're not going to reinvent 90% of it's still the same, right? So I break down seed rounds into 3 components: team, traction, and narrative. And so I can't help you with your team. Just get a good, really, really, really concentrate on surrounding a good team.
It could be an opportunity right now because more there's crunch for talent, and there might be some good talent coming out right now, right?
Absolutely. And you do, as you're bringing folks on, whether founder or early hires, and this will come into some of my other advice. I mean, I don't look at a lot of spreadsheets. It's not at the seed stage, it's not really a good use of time to do any modeling, right? Because everything's just kind of made up. So the most tangible thing I can do is background work on people. And so doing deep reference checks, and there are reference checks that you don't know that are happening. And it's not using a service. It's calling your boss and your boss's boss and your ex-CEO of whatever years ago to really get the profile of who you are and how much of a killer you are. Are you really someone who can build a large business? And so that's happening in the background with or without your permission, typically. That should be happening on your early hires too, because I'm not just calling on the CEO founder. I'm even critical of someone hired a VP of product. I'm gonna check on the VP of product as well, because it's really the only tangible work I can do. Otherwise, I'm just guessing about the future and like making up numbers in a spreadsheet.
So get the
So
best team possible that surrounds you, that actually speeds, hopefully a great founder market fit, and a team that is just stellar, knowing the space and know what they're doing.
correct, and I'm going to come back to this like reference check thing in a second. And so you have that, and like that's up to you. Like instinctually, the great founders already know this and already have convinced, because getting a good team around you, it also tells investors that you're able to attract people to come work with you when you have nothing. And that speaks volume. If you can like surround yourself with resources with no resources, you know, you start wondering like, what the hell could they do with capital? So second thing is you get on to traction. And so traction's hard, right? Because you don't have a ton of time, you don't have a ton of money. And so usually people like entrepreneurs will come to me and like talk about revenue, like what revenue targets I have to hit. And like, I don't fucking know. Like, it depends on your category. Like, I don't really think about like a bar for revenue, but if you're able to invent your own traction, right? So in certain cases, it could be like, you know, people usually list like partnerships and things that they've done. And I don't really care about it because everybody can list partnerships. But if suddenly you have like an exclusive partnership in one channel where you are scheduled to go live with certain resources behind it, it might not bring any actual resources, but like that's unique. It's something that like you've created. And so there's things that can help take me through that's something like unique that you've progressed. But I want to be very clear, like progressing through simply like knocking off standard integrations and things like that, like that's the rite of passage. Like everyone has to do that. I'm looking for things that like literally only you have. And so as like to eat my own dog food, when we were raising capital for FlipKey many moons ago, we had established the largest software company in the vacation rental space. We had a signed contract with economic like teeth to it that we were the exclusive guest review platform. So every single one of their clients, they're going to collect guest reviews, would do it through our platform. And so we hadn't even collected a review yet through it. And we were in the process of like building that out. But that was like a teethy exclusive, and it gave us access to like over half the industry. And that was gold. That was like something really unique that no one else could claim. So like traction matters, and like really press to like create bodies of work where it really, really like expresses how your team is executing and how you're thinking about the market. And then the last thing is the narrative, right? It's the storytelling.
Just a quick one, TJ, like just for traction, because I love that point. Like we're trying to drive this home every single day. And there's the story that traction actually tells. You say like have a partnership, but like, hey, exclusive is better. Have some traction with people. Make sure that you have actually clusters and repeatability built in there, and not just all over the place. And so the story that the traction tells you, and that the team is actually very thoughtful around how they roll out the company, that's another indicator that this is a very mature team, right?
Yeah. And then blending all three in narrative, like traction, whatever. Like this next point on the narrative is that back 20 years ago, when I was like starting companies, we used to have these things called friends and family rounds. And people have been skipping that for the last 5 years for the most part. But like, I think it might be sage advice to like go back to the future, where you put together a $500,000 round capped at 500,000 with a small valuation, 4 mil, 5 mil. And basically you're giving 10% of the business to like people who are just going to blindly like trust you and believe in you. And then people who can really matter. And so I don't think there will be ever a time than right now to have a good set of other operators and angels like in your corner before you're having institutional conversations. And so the way you do that is like, again, some people say it's not fair. Like I don't have that network because, you know, I've been on the outside, but I'm ready to do this startup. And I would say like, it's going to be more challenging for you because that's the case, but like, this is the hustle. You've got to get in front of folks. You got to show the market that you can convince some trusted operators that like, you're the woman, you're the guy, you're the one that can get this thing done. And so, you know, getting those folks is kind of embolizes both the team function, traction, getting these people to believe like, no, he's on to something, like, or she figured this thing out. And I know that market kind of well, and I think she's onto it better than anyone else. And so you pull those people in. The reason they want to put in 10 grand, 20 grand is because like they like you. You've convinced them you're the one that can get this done. And you just said like, I'm actually going to go back in time and I'm going to do a 4 mil cap or a 5 mil cap. I will not take more than this money. If any venture fund or whatever comes in and says, no, wipe them out, I just want the rest of it. No way. This is reserved for people who are part of the early journey, and you're going to get paid for it. And like, that is something, it took me 6 months to do that with FlipKey. And I don't want to like project my experience as like the thing to do now, but back then it was way harder. That was the housing crisis. It was way harder to raise money. And these are the things you had to do to like start building up a body of work where someone's like, they're just ahead of the curve. They're like, they've just got a profile that looks like something that could work. So in your narrative, right? So your narrative first starts off with like, who do you have around the table? Your team and like some of the investors. And there's ways you can do to like kind of bring that together without like totally exhausting yourself. Then the next thing, and this is the only like, you know, obviously you have to be a good storyteller. And I'm not going to, have Mike Troiano or somebody on to talk about storytelling, but like be a good storyteller, maybe even get a public speaking coach, videotape yourself on Zooms and literally see how you're really doing. And then get a third trusted party to watch to give you candid feedback on if you're good or not. Chances are you're not as good as you think you are, but it's fixable. Like telling a story and like public speaking is like actually fixable. And so get super good at it. But in this market, I would say the unique aspect that would have changed is that I think you need to find a reason that now is the time. So it's always been like, well, why now? It's like a typical like VC question, like why now? And now you got to double down on that, where you should be offensive of like on the offense, I should say, on what your response to that is, to the point where no one's going to ask it to you. You're just going to tell them. So as an example, I got pitched, there's a company in the e-commerce space called Recharge. They do automated, they do subscription billing. So they are like the back end Stripe for CPGs that like have recurring billing when you say, yeah, I want that every month. Big business. They're worth like $2 billion. Tons of money have gone into it. But people are very critical of the product. So there's like there's probably a dozen companies that have pitched me that are like going after those guys. So I got pitched yesterday or last week. And the founder, she noted to me, she was like, I was like, the switching costs seem really hard, blah, 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 all this. Like they've been around, they have a lot of defensive barriers. And she was like, but did you know that like Shopify just changed the way that you have to interface with their checkout and their tokens? So everyone, even if you stay with Recharge, you have to re-platform to their new version. So right now, over the next 12 months, every single company using Recharge has to re-platform either to back to them or to a new service. So there's a window right now. And that was like, the light bulb went off in my head and I was like, oh.
So great market.
And this is the time. Like if you're going to make a play on this, it is now. Yeah. It's not, I'm not going to, if I wait for the market to correct this whole window where they can actually play offense and like have a real GTM, like that's now. And so I think one of my better investments over the last few years was a travel company. I cut that check the day after lockdown. And the reason I did, and so the guy called and he was like, I want you in, blah, blah, blah. And I said, why in the world would I invest in a travel company in the middle of pandemic during lockdown when there's literally no airplanes in the sky? And he was like, well, because this is your last chance. You'll never get a chance to invest in me again because like no one's doing this. And when it comes back, I will own This is a layer no one's working on. And when it comes back, like this is the time, like no one's selling flights. So they're going to be integrating ancillary services like right now. Now is the time where I get to embed myself, because in other times I get pushed down on the pipeline product pipeline list. So I believed him, and he was totally right. He like 10x'd his integration and commercial relationships, while all the airlines were looking around for something to do to get ready for people coming back. And when they came back, like I've never seen a hockey stick like it before. So it's like you have to look at yourself and be like, what is that? Do I have anything like that? Is there a reason right now is special? And if you can find that reason, package it up and help bring us along to like why that investment needs to happen now and can't wait for 6 months.
And actually, I to totally support your point. Like I think in uh, tough times, it's well, first of all, it's even more important to actually explain why would you even invest in me. But these tough times usually create other narratives than if everything is fine and everything is out there. You need to dig really hard to kind of get that narrative. But there's chances out there, and the best companies have been many times been born in tough times, and because they had to make choices. So that there's a real opportunity here. I want to remind everybody Q&A. Please put your questions in the Q&As. One last question before we go to the questions. Thanks, TJ, for all the insights. Now, I'm wondering. We were talking about like, okay, go after funding, and this is you need to have team, you need to have traction, you need to have the right narrative. Still there's some like, what do I do as a founder? Like what some say hunker down and fire a bunch of people, save costs. Some others say, hey, prepare for the worst. Some others say, hey, keep on doing what you're doing because there's enough market for the good startups. So what do I do as a founder? Like, do I go, what are the strategic options that I have, and what do you think makes the most sense? Obviously depends on market and where you are and all of that stuff, but what would you say? Is this where you hunker down and all is about cost saving, or is this being aggressive and driving it towards a certain direction?
I mean, it's a snowflake. Like every situation is going to be a little unique. I'll say that there are opportunities in our portfolio where we have proactively offered at more of a market rate, an immediate, and I wouldn't even call it, I would just call it a plus round, where the company's already healthy and we're like, let's put another 2-3 mil together. So you should just play offense right now. Like nobody in the market has a better value proposition or a better story to tell right now than you. So like, let's go tell it and not hunker down. But we believe that they're like, given what they do, that is a fit for that strategy. I have others that have not found product market fit, have good tech, have a couple like happy customers, will be very difficult to raise from an outside group right now. Probably haven't earned an inside check either. And like, yeah, if you haven't like found that moment, that aha, you got to hunker down. And that's what I always call it. I call it the aha moment, where something has happened, where it is clear and it's not like, it doesn't take 5 slides to like take someone through why you're valuable, worth investing. Like a 1-line sentence is enough for people to be like, oh my God, like we're really interested in talking to you. And like, if you haven't found that moment or that point of traction or that win, then like, yeah, you kind of need to hunker down, because the checks aren't easy, right? This is going to be a market where a lot of money is going to be looking for opportunities they're going to hold. And I think that they will continue to pay up for like quality, and would rather probably deploy some of that money into their inside companies, into their extensions, than to new companies. And so, yeah, if you don't have a great story, you got you got to hunker down because it's like twice as hard. But if things are happening, like I said, there's a couple companies we have where we're actually proactively like, don't be safe right now, whereas others where we're telling to be very safe.
Yeah. And I think we're usually using the image of an engine, right? So engine and fuel. From an investor's perspective, the best thing that could happen, you build a very efficient, repeatable engine that goes through the motion over and over again and produces success. and then to have the fuel to go even faster or farther, that's an easy decision. If the engine is not figured out and it's still all over the place, that's kind of like where you probably also don't want too much fuel. You want to figure that out if you can, and you have the runway to figure that out
Yeah.
first, to have the
And
narrative.
like, I'd say over the last 5 years, the message in the market was like market was paying for growth and growth only, um, which which is unfortunate. Like it's not kind of how I totally look at companies, and I felt a lot of good companies got overlooked because they were, God forbid, only growing 2x year over year instead of 3x year over year. So I think that those standards are going to get kind of put to bed. And the whole 3x narrative, which is what I heard a lot from a lot of my co-investors, like didn't really want to see opportunities unless, yeah, they were at like 3x or 2.5x at scale going year over year, which is really expensive to do. Right. So if that's gone, then you're like, okay, then it's back to like, again, I don't want to project my own past history, but product market fit where you can sit and go a little slower, work with some design partners. So some like key clients that like, if they use your product, really, really signal that there's value in it, working super close with them to the point where like they're doing reference calls for you and they feel part of your company. And like, you can actually take the time to do that more thoughtfully than over the last 5 years where people just wanted you to push it out to market, see who took to it, throw money where on lookalike audiences, whether it's B2B or whatever, like that, the metaphor of lookalike audiences, not the actual product. And yeah, and so I think you're going to have a market that's a little, at least for now, a little more patient, that gives you time to like build a product people actually need.
Okay, now we're slowly coming to an end. TJ, do you have actually 5 minutes more than the 12:45 by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to let's go through the questions here that I have here, and let's have maybe one, two, three sentence answers so that we get through those. Christopher is asking, what do you see as the main traction differential between pre-seed and seed? When should a founder consider skipping a pre-seed raise?
I consider pre-seed raise that friends and family round. So like, I would go straight to the seed if your team is like a branded team. And what I mean by about branded team is that they were senior, well-known, and like celebrated at their former companies, and their former companies are well-known and reputable software companies. And if instead they're like super young, or they were kind of at a larger company or at a consulting company looking to come in, those aren't pre-qualifiers for us. And you would probably need to do a pre-seed round and like put together a syndicate and get some traction. So people give you credit for like, okay, this team can do it. But if you were in an organization that was already executing and people at that organization gave you a lot of credit for that, then I think you can go straight to a seed if you spend the time like, and then this is going back to my reference thing earlier. Like I always call if the CEO is not investing in you, I always ask them why. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't do angel investing. And then I'll really press to be like, well, like I'll give you money. You can donate it, or you can like to save the world, or you can put it into this entrepreneur, and really try and get a clear-cut answer of like, would they have been willing? And so like the teams that are killers, like most people are like, they haven't asked me. If they would ask me, I'd put money into the company for sure. They're money makers. And this is why like, make sure you do your own references, figure out what you think people will say, or even call them. And I would call your past CEOs and be like, so it would be really great if you put some amount of money in my company to show people that you believe I can do this. And if they don't believe you can do this and they give you some critical feedback, just doesn't mean you're screwed. It's just like, okay, you're going to need to manage that. Like what, that's not, you wish you had it the other way, and just be prepared. And you can even tell investors like, yeah, if you call Miss CEO, they I didn't have the best relationship with them. Like they'll think I'm okay, but like I'm not that close with them. The people who will think the highest of me are these types of people. And so you direct me away from calling those people.
Yeah.
And this is how you can start creating the myth of yourself where everyone's supportive. You kind of know who's going to be called.
Yeah.
And if you find that no one really good can be called, you should ask yourself if you're ready to do this thing. Because now you're going to really just rely on traction, and you're going to have to do that on your own.
Love it, love it. Gregory has the question: What do you think it might? Would you think it might be a downturn for 5 years, not 18 months, because the Fed will continue to raise interest rates and causing drops for years? What do you think about this? Maybe one or two sentence answer.
I just think there's too much capital that needs to be deployed into the market that will we're not going to get back to where we were. I mean, the valuations that we were seeing 6 months ago are probably bye-bye for a very long time. But in terms of like healthy capital infusions into the market, and then valuations getting to a point where they're somewhat stabilized, I don't think that happens in 5 years. I think there's too much capital, can't wait that long. And I go back to my earlier point. What we saw during COVID pushed a lot of people into new behaviors. Those are the new behaviors that like we tend to build towards. And so like we did get a bump in adoption. There is a bunch of capital that needs to go into new solutions. I think valuations might suffer a little bit, but like companies will get funded. So that's why I like 5 years seems a bit too long.
And I agree. That's usually not the cycles that you see a downturn. It's like usually a fund wants to deploy a lot of their money in the first 3 years. There's some ways how the mechanics work, and I think there's no bad bones in the market. Is maybe a little overinflated in a way. Quick one, TJ. Are you investing? There's Lucia is asking. Hi, Lucia. By the way, if you're investing in emerging markets other than US.
That's a kind of. We have made a foreign investment in a kind of like e-commerce marketing platform in India. It was kind of the exception. We weren't necessarily looking for it. It came across through various folks. So I will summarize my answer by saying we do not seek foreign investments right now. If special opportunities come across our desk from the right people in our network, we will look at them seriously, but it's not something that we seek out. We honestly don't have that. We don't have the manpower. There's two and a half of us. I still sit on a couple of my accomplice boards. Like we just got to box the world to a certain degree. Larger funds should 100% start doing that, but that's just not our game right now.
And by the way, it's 45. I just want to we gotta continue a couple more minutes if you want to stay on. If you need to drop off, that's the time right now. Let me ask the last question here, and we do a couple more, teacher, if you have the time. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do this?
Honestly, and I don't mean to like sound obtuse or hard to get, but it's not just professionally, but also like I have a family, I have like little kids, like we're all just humans. And so the amount of communications that comes through my phone and my inbox is quite vast. The things that tend to cut through the clutter is when a founder I respect emails me or texts me and goes, I met an entrepreneur today that I really like. You should meet her. That goes right to the top of the queue.
And people that know the space and that know you and what you're looking for. So having that filter in between.
That's a better. So if I get the same ping from an investor, even the best ones, the most well-known ones, the one from the founder is more important to me. Because it's statistically more interesting than when investors.
And we'll answer a couple more questions after this. Ross just put it into the chat. By the way, we're offering a great workshop next week, Why Your Messaging Sucks. So the great Brian Dannenberg, who's my partner at the Ventureline Studio, does this. So if you're interested, there's the link in there, or go on our website under the studio and you can apply. Great workshop, frankly, can be life-changing. I've seen this. Now, I have a couple more questions here for you. TJ, Gregory was asking, how does then an introduction email look like? Many people say, "Hey, send me a forwardable email." What's your take on that? What's how do you want that feedback of that filtered person in the middle? What's the best thing? Is it a telephone call? Is this a quick description? Is this just the person and whatever they send? What do you want this outreach to be, or how?
Yeah, I mean, again, well, going back, like I'm just saying the optimal one is like kind of a referral from another entrepreneur who I'm familiar with. But yeah, if they just forward something you've written that's just like, this is the thing we're building to solve this problem that we think is pretty big. Um, and then I mean, all I really need to hear is from that other entrepreneur being like, no, this is a, I really like these kids. They're good. Like that's all I really need to hear.
Okay.
Because it doesn't mean I'm going to invest in anyway, but like out of the gate, I already believe that like there's probably some talent on the team, and whether or not I can fund it or not, like remember a lot of folks have to do this a couple times before they hit it, and so the beginning of me getting to know you has begun. But I can't get to know everybody. Like there's got to be some process because like the time's so finite, and so that like it's just my honest answer. Like you want to cut through it, like you get close. So again, to eat my own dog food. How did I do that? I went to Macalester College, a small school. It's kind of like Harvard is the Macalester of the East Coast. Anyways, so Macalester is kind of known as like one of like the better schools in the Midwest. Small school, 2,000 kids. Jeremy Allaire went to school there, graduated before me. When I started Flipkey, I'd never met him before. At the time, he was CEO of Bright Cove, and I mean, he's been the CEO of like a million things at this point. So I got into his office as a Mac grad, told him I wanted to show him what I was working on, talked to him about how I thought like peer-to-peer travel was going to like about to happen. Started talking about the sharing economy, and that wasn't even a coined term at the time. He was really into it. And I was just like, listen, I want to put you on my advisory board. I'll give you some equity. I also need you to let like, but to do that, you need to also make a personal investment. Like people need to know that you truly actually do believe in the idea and in myself. And he was like, yeah, definitely. I'd be happy to. So we'd do a lot. We did a couple like strategy sessions with him. And then he started introducing us to he knew the whole VC community. And he would just make introductions saying like, hey guys, I'm working with TJ and his team. I really like them. You should 100% meet. So when I would go into offices, it was never a meet and greet. I usually had full partner meetings because Jeremy Allaire sent so if Jeremy Allaire sent this, like we all need to meet this kid. And so I was able to expand my network and access very quickly, simply by spending considerate time being like, Jeremy Allaire is going to be my ambassador. He's the guy. I'm going to get him. Once I got him, I had this excuse to get into a lot of other people's offices.
Awesome. Good. I love the good hack. Jack is asking, you said like the team side is key, how big of a negative is it being a solo founder?
I will say I have not seen a ton of great outcomes with solo founders. I personally, the biggest problems I've had in my life in this line of work have been with solo founders, both in outcome and in interpersonal relationships. It's hard. Like building a company is so hard. And when you get isolated and it's just you, one, you start finding that you're not being honest with yourself. Two, the pressure can get like overwhelming to the point where it starts changing you as a person. So I don't love it. It has been done. There are plenty of examples of solo entrepreneurs. But the only way I would say you could be a solo entrepreneur is if you're a technical solo entrepreneur. If you're just a business guy and you're hiring folks and like putting together some offshore dev team to build the application concept you have, like that has in our office has zero chance of getting funded. So ideally, there are at least two founders in my world. I like to see minimum of two founders. There's kind of a business first founder who seems just like a killer, someone who like can't take no for an answer, is super both likable but sharp, and is technically competent, but isn't where they spend their time. And then there's a technical co-founder in there. Sometimes those people are the same people. Um, and they simply have hard opinions on how things should be built. And then one of the reasons they want to do this is not the economic opportunity, but like they literally feel like this thing hasn't been built right and they have a strong opinion on it. And those are like, that tends to be the chemistry that I think really like ends up working. And it's always like, if you can dabble in a product, and sometimes that product person is one of those two people. But if there's a third founder who is like really good product and in design and like in communications, because they realize communications is part of product, now you've got like a really good trio. But so it's not the end of the world. Definitely not ideal.
Okay. TJ, quick answer. Christoph Gum, hi Christoph, by the way. Do you see an interest level of 3% for you or for the US Treasury as a problem for the entire VC market to dry out?
So I do not have any historicals here. So I'm literally guessing, but in my experience, I don't think interest rates really affect the venture capital community whatsoever. To the point where I've been doing this, building companies and making investments, building companies for 20 plus years, making investments for 10 plus years. I actually couldn't tell you what the interest rates are ever. I mean, I know that they are impactful for that macroeconomic community. I think about them more because we want to like move. And so I'm wondering, I'm hoping housing prices go down a little bit, but like that's, I just remember. So a good way to think about this is like our LPs, people who invest in my fund and all the other funds, the reason that they do it is they're looking for alpha. They're looking for something that beats the market. They don't want to beat the market a little bit. They want to beat the market by a lot. And allocated in their portfolio, we might get 5% as a category. VCs get 5% of the capital that they deploy. Everything else is in publics, munis, alts, things like that. So we are like, when you walk into a casino and someone like puts on the roulette table, they pick their favorite number. Like they're doing that because they either want to make 50 times their money or they want to just like have fun watching it and then walking away. Like that is what the venture category is. And so interest rates don't really affect the psychology or the logic that people use to deploy money to our category, which is why I don't think that they're really tied together.
Maybe the only thing that I could think of is that the LPs, the interest rate might have some impact on their equity investment and how much money they can actually deploy. But that's a very indirect thing. But yeah, good question. Now, there was Brianne was actually asking, what SaaS multiples are you seeing for seed rounds these days as a multiple of ARR?
So seed rounds are tricky, right? Because if you're at 20K ARR, you still need to do a round of 2 million. No one wants to dilute you too much. And so it's going to give you a multiple of 100, like somewhere in the hundreds, which isn't, I don't think about multiples at the seed round. The multiples come more into play in the A's, B's, and C's. I have definitely seen in like folks that are past the 5 ARR mark where, acceptable multiples are in this high single digits now. I think things that are still growing quickly in large markets can be, might get 20, but like the days of 30, it wasn't that long ago where 20 was a premium. So we're kind of back to that, and it might still fall from there. But we went through a period where some late stage growth companies were getting between 30 and 50, and like that's done. I think what you need to more think through is that once you get to call it the million or 500K to a million, that people might give you in that early of a stage, possibly what you could consider 30, but it's only because of your growth and what you're growing into. But that's really not the math people are doing that early. Like the multiple, it's just too early to really have a usable multiple to frame that.
Would you say that the
But
narrative around your traction and rather having good momentum going and that you see this as a sustained motion, maybe over a quarter, 2 quarters of kind of adding on continuously and seeing that motion working out more important than really
yeah,
just
I would say the more interesting exercise would be putting that money and seeing like what do we believe will happen to this company over the next 12, maybe in this environment 18 months. Um, where do we think this gets them? And then from there, you start making some of your assumptions around multiples and like what market's paying for various companies. And then, so if I believe that the market will pay for 50, then I'm like, yeah, I can do around, I can, in the, maybe 20 million, right? 15 to 20 million range, because I really believe that this is the outcome. Or if I think it just means the company's probably worth 15 million in 12 months, I'm like, it's still very early. Let's do a 1.5 on 7.5. That's where we're at right now. And so it's really thinking through how things will play out, taking your body of work. What does that capital do now? And that's more the math we do internally versus like throwing a multiple in there.
yeah. And listen, I think we probably could chat for another hour. I want to be mindful of your time. Thank you so much, TJ, for your insight. That was taking away, get your team, get your traction, get your narrative right. A couple of really great gold nuggets on how to actually make that happen. I loved your little takeaway, like create your own references. I did not actually hear that before. That's pretty cool. Thank you so much for your insights, guys.
Thanks, guys. I got to run to a one.
Yeah, check out Venture Lane Studios website. We got our application process going for the studio. We're taking 4 to 6 companies in. Fundraising is actually a big part of that. So check it out. We have it in the chat. Otherwise, hope to see you soon. We'll probably take a little summer break for Fastlane. I'll come back in 2 months' time. We're demystifying the venture space and really understanding how our early stage fundraising is going. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Have a good rest of the day.